Hello friends, this is your teacher Manish, and in continuation with our playlist for Java programming and in continuation with our discussion on computing environment, in this video we plan to take further deep dive on different components of computing environment. Okay, plus we will also see different generations of programming languages. Plus we will also see how a high level programming language, say for example C, actually gets converted into machine level language and what happens after that. Okay, so we saw in previous video that computing environment has got basically three major or critical components. Okay, so one is microprocessor, so typically mu. So microprocessor is termed as mu-p. Okay, then we have a RAM, which is nothing but your random access memory, and the third component, which is also a very important component, is your secondary storage, which is nothing but your hard disk. Okay, so these are the three components which interact with each other to give us a computing environment which with the help of operating system can be used by a user. Okay, so let's see what a microprocessor is. So we saw microprocessor basically is an integrated circuit. It's a chip which is fitted onto a motherboard. So every computer which has got its brain as a microprocessor typically is called a microcomputer. Okay, so microprocessors are manufactured by different companies. One of the leading company is Intel. So you would find lot of microprocessors, different versions of microprocessors that have come which are manufactured by Intel. So there are other companies, couple of examples of them are Motorola, Zilog. Okay, Zilog manufactures Z80. Okay, so microprocessor basically reads the instructions from RAM and executes these instructions to produce certain output, and then that output can be stored onto secondary storage. Okay, so every microprocessor has got a instruction set. So if I have to give an example of Intel, the probably oldest microprocessor which I am aware of could be 8085, and after that was 8088, 80186, 80286, 80386, 80486. So probably it evolved in last 35 years. So 8085 actually had approximately 70 plus instructions, and as the newer version, so 8088 came, probably few more instructions were added into it. So what's an instruction set? So basically instructions are such that they will have a corresponding circuitry built on the microprocessor. So if an instruction is add, or if the instruction is multiply, MUL, then against add there will be a circuitry built onto a microprocessor which will add the values of two registers and give you an output. Similarly, MUL instruction will have circuitry built on microprocessor which will multiply the values of two registers and give the output. Okay, so these instruction set is what microprocessor understands. Microprocessor doesn't understand anything beyond what its instruction set is available. Okay, and of course instruction set is going to be in zeros and ones. That's the machine level. Okay, and all zeros and ones instructions are going to be in RAM and RAM, from RAM it gets loaded onto microprocessor and a microprocessor executes it. Okay, so this is basically how microprocessor functions at a very high level. Okay, without going into detailed nitty-gritties of it, because we are not going to visit digital circuitry or logic gates. Okay, we are more concentrating it at a architecture level. Random access memory. So what's a bit? Basically, bit is nothing but which has got a value of either 0 and 1. And yesterday we saw what basically 0 and 1 is. So 0 stands, or 0 would have say minus 5 volts electrical signal, and 1 would have plus 5 volt electrical signal. Okay, and combination of zeros and ones really make the language which microprocessor would understand. So RAM, what does RAM have? So imagine RAM as if an array of say 8-bit bytes. So collection of 8 bits, 7, 8. So collection of 8 bits would make 1 byte, and RAM would be nothing but collection of this. So this is 1 byte, this is another byte. So you will have this collection of 8 bits, collection of bytes into RAM, on which information is stored in the form of zeros and ones. And 8 bits make 1 byte. Okay, so similarly 1000 bytes make 1, I would say, kilobyte. 1000 kilobyte would make 1 megabyte, and 1000 megabyte would make 1 gigabyte. So if you have a memory of say 2 gigabyte, then actually you will have 2 into 10 raised to 9 bytes. So you will have so many locations in an array sequentially for your 2 GB of memory. So this is basically how RAM or memory is organized at a high level. So what's secondary storage? So secondary storage is basically you would say a cylinder of disks which rotate around the spindle, and there are read and write heads. Okay, based on based on the instruction either to read or write from the secondary storage. Okay, information gets passed on to RAM. Now remember one thing, secondary storage hard disk is a mechanical, lots of mechanical work is involved there, because of which because all the disks rotate continuously around the spindle, and this which generates a lot of heat, and read write is further going to, because those heads move up and down on the cylinder, and that's where the heat gets generated. And relatively reading from secondary storage becomes very I would say bottleneck, because IO takes time, whereas reading from the RAM is a chip, and probably reading from the RAM microprocessor, it's much more faster. Okay, and hence the more larger memory, the more faster probably, and the processing would be. Okay, if you have secondary lesser memory, then the swap is used from secondary storage, which slows down your computer. Actually, IO, which is very slow, creates a bottleneck as far as speed is concerned, and because of that distributed processing has come, which is currently taking place. But although that's not the subject of our discussion currently, just wanted to let you know that secondary storage, reading and writing on from secondary storage is very slower as compared to reading and writing from RAM. Okay, so basically this is the computing environment. Okay, now we spoke that the computer or the computing environment, your microprocessor, only understands the language of zeros and one. So language of 0 and 1 is basically the first generation language. Okay, and it is called as machine language. Okay, so second generation language, okay, is your assembly language. Okay, and the high level languages which we often work upon or which we often learn in your academics are third generation languages, and they are like C, C++, Java, okay, Python. So all these languages, okay, are third generation languages. So first generation language is machine level language, language of zeros and ones. Second generation language is assembly language. Assembly language typically has got mnemonics like add, mul, multiply, mul, mul. Okay, every assembly language is dependent on the make of microprocessor. Okay, and to convert assembly language into machine level language, you need something called as assembler. So assembler actually converts the machine level assembly language into machine level language. Okay, and third generation languages are typically English like languages. They comprises of keywords, they comprises of constants, variables, they have functions, procedures, they have classes. Okay, so there is a syntax which needs to be followed in these languages. So C will have its own syntax, Java would have its own syntax. Okay, and basically you need a compiler to compile third generation languages. So let us take an example of C. So what typically happens in C is, if you have a .c program, okay, it needs to be compiled. Okay, and a compiler compiles the .c code and converts it into assembly code. Okay, which is further converted by assembler, okay, into a object code. And object code is, there are libraries at all, which these libraries are linked with object code to actually give you a machine level code, which is nothing but your .exe or the executable. So to compile, there are number of steps. Compilation actually initially finds the syntax errors. So if there are any syntax errors in the code, the compiler flashes it out. On removing the syntax error, okay, now generation of assembly code, conversion of assembly code to object code may not be visible to you. The function of linkers is not visible to you. It is all done by the compiler. So if C compiler, typically CC, so when you give CC and the C code name, it goes and creates a exe file for you. Okay, so this is what basically the compilation process is, and hence you need a compiler for third generation language. Third generation language could also be interpreted. So there are interpreters. The difference between compilers and interpreters you need to understand. Okay, so for a compiler, you actually you compile it once and then it gets converted into executable, okay, and then you don't need source code unless the source code undergoes any changes which needs a recompilation and regeneration of executable. But as far as interpreter is concerned, interpreter interprets every time the source code and converts it into native code or exe or executable, okay, on the fly, so during the execution time. So every time interpreter is going to read the source code and convert it, okay. So this is basically the difference between a compiler and interpreter, okay. There are one more languages which we typically see, and it is fourth generation language. And fourth generation language is something which is like so structured query language. SQL is, you can say it as a fourth generation language, because SQL doesn't worry about how to do things, which typically is worried by third, second generation language. SQL more worries about what to do. So you just have to instruct that I need to insert a record, or I need to delete a record, or I need to update a record, okay, or I need to create a database, a table. So SQL is basically a fourth generation language. So these are the four generation of languages, okay. So basically getting into further details of third generation language, and also taking C as a base, and because most of you would have some background of C, okay. So as I said, any language, any programming language comprises of constants, variables, it would have loops, keywords, assignments, it would have expressions, okay. So in C typically you define a variable, okay, and typically the elementary data types in C which we are very much aware of and which we use frequently are int, float and char. I'm not going to talk, or I'm not considering the variants of this, because signed, unsigned, long, double are different variants of int and float. So elementary data type basically are int, float and char, and there is one more boolean, but let's keep boolean a bit aside, okay. And apart from that, we basically have arrays, structures and unions. So if I have to consider array and structure, then array is nothing but a collection of elements of similar data types. So you can have array of integers, or array of floating point numbers, or array of characters which become string, okay. And structure is basically, you can have members of different data types. So you can have structure, define a structure, and you can have an employee number and employee name as two members of structure. Then you can have employee number as integer and employee name as probably array of characters, okay. So but if you really see, these are three defined major data types, elementary data types. So everything rotates around it, okay. And that's where basically the limitation of C-like language starts, when it comes to reusability, when it comes to maintenance, okay. And probably the strength of Java like language, of strength of classes and objects, or strength of object oriented comes which gives rise to easy maintenance, reusability, inheritance, encapsulation, okay, which was not that much available in C. Okay, and C kind of language is more of a function oriented and not the object based. Okay, so this limitation actually becomes the strength of Java. So in my next video we are going to see basically what object oriented is and what user defined data types are, and what classes and objects at a high level is. Because once we get introduced to that, I think we would be good enough to get into the programming of Java. Okay, so let's speak about objects, classes at a high level in the next video, and then we'll start getting our hands dirty onto Java. Okay, so folks, if you like this video, do like it, do subscribe my channel, share it. Okay, and I hope you're enjoying this playlist. If you have any comments, please do shoot back comments to me. I'm trying all that I can to give you the basics and fundamentals which will help you to grasp Java in a better way. Bye till now.